Let's talk a little bit about power structures. Dictatorships based on data and based on empathy are often quite efficient, particularly in small countries and small areas, because they're not accountable to the various politics and inefficiencies that come with consensus or democracy. And when they're empathy-based and data-based, they can be quite effective. It was the king of Bhutan that initiated the idea of a national happiness quotient, the idea of being a carbon positive country, one of the few countries in the world that gives back more breathable air than it consumes. And the king, in an empathic expression of autocracy, insisted on a democracy. And he insisted on a democracy in Bhutan because he said, yes, you love me and you love the monarchy because I'm a good king, but I can't guarantee what the next king will do. And so I insist, I use my executive authority against the will of the people to force democracy on a country that in my kingship would prefer autocracy. And so there are pros and cons to democracy. Democracy hinges on maturity, knowledge, and competency. If you have mature, knowledgeable people sharing power, statistically speaking, they will outperform a dictatorship. But if you have an incompetent majority, they will underperform in a democracy a competent autocracy, meaning the king of Bhutan outperformed the United States in a number of metrics of intelligence. And as a result, the Bhutanese people experience more well-being per unit of energy invested under the rule of a king than the United States people experience under the rule of Donald Trump, or even the various political branches in power, and under the rule of President Obama, or any of our recent presidents. The king of Bhutan was actually able to initiate a paradigm shift, which is something that is more profound than a policy change. A paradigm shift is involved in moving from a cult that measures capital and the production of capital per person as its primary metric of wealth to happiness and the percentage of happiness per person as its primary measure of wealth. That is a paradigm shift from an inferior paradigm that measures the golden egg more than the golden goose. The golden goose produces an infinite number of golden eggs. Happy, competent people produce an infinite amount of wealth. But wealth does not produce an infinite number of happy people. And it is profoundly sociopathic and a little bit self-loathing for human beings to value the money that they create ahead of themselves, which is expressed in the millions of homeless in the United States who would be treated well except for the fact that they don't have money. They would be treated as well as their money is treated in a cult that deifies capital, that has a capitalist paradigm that went to war with a communal paradigm, the capitalists and the communists. We believe in capital. We believe in people. We believe in the rights of money. We believe in the rights of people. Let's go to war. And of course, the communists didn't believe in the rights of people any more than the capitalists. They both believed in dominance and power in a variety of ways, and screw the people, that don't like doing it our way. The Bhutanese actually value their human capital, the amount of well-being that's in their community. So this being an introduction to some of the conundrums of power, Ray Dalio, founder of Bridgewater, one of the leading, best-performing hedge funds that our capitalist nation has produced, wanted to, as a way of making more money, develop a power structure that was a competence-based democracy. So our culture gives an illiterate sociopath the same right to vote as a conscientious, highly informed citizen. We all have the right to vote whether we know what we're doing or not. And this is why an intelligent dictatorship can outperform an addictive, ignorant democracy that is in high states of traumatic recovery and survival. So in this paradigm, what Ray did was he built an app. It was a decision-making app for making investment decisions at Bridgewater. And the app tracked a number of things. It tracked the competency of the individuals in the area in question. For example, if you're a janitor and there's a cleaning decision, you'd get a 10 if you're, considered a decent janitor for janitorial decisions. If you're a janitor and the question is, what's the best glass blowing technique in cool, damp weather, the janitor would get a 0 in competency ranking for that particular decision. But a glass blower in the group would, if they were a decent glass blower, would get a 10 in weight, the weight of their opinion. Now, the janitor may have an opinion that they want to voice about what they think a glass blower should do in damp January cold weather. But it is not going to get attention the way that a competent glass blower might approach the same dynamic, as a default at least. And so this was the idea, that decisions would be made by a point scoring system, that everyone would score each other on competencies in different areas to establish how much weight to give to a given person in different areas. And they could score themselves, of course. So you have a scoring assessment of competency that evolves with time. You make 3 terrible decisions in this domain in a row. While you were certain you were correct each time, your competency goes down, because now when you're certain you're correct in this next time, well, it's not terribly relevant because you were certain you were right the last 3 times, so who gives a damn? We want success. We don't want your delusion of self-confidence. We want success. And so he developed an app, which unfortunately, this app technology is such a valuable technology, meaning it has given Bridgewater as a hedge fund, such an edge over other hedge funds that while he'll write about it in his book on Principles, a great book for anyone who wants to transform relational and other power structures, it's good to learn from the technology used to make money, because that technology gets more funding in a capitalist cult than any other technology. Meaning, it's quite likely that Ray Dalio might spend more money on the decision-making technology for making billions of dollars than the entire country would spend on technology to mitigate divorce. Because in one of the bizarre natures of a trauma-based capitalist cult, financial expenditure goes up with divorce, meaning the metrics of our financial intelligence say that we're winning when more families get a divorce, because now more money is being spent on rent and more money needs to be made, and people need to be more slaved at jobs that 77% of Americans don't like. And so in a capitalist cult where money is king, if we could just have everyone get a divorce and then abuse more children so there was more money being spent on trauma therapists and more money being spent repairing broken windows from juvenile delinquents and more money being spent on federal prisons than we already do, our GDP and our gross national product measured in dollars per person would just skyrocket. We would be making money hand over fist as we dive down into a deeper abyss of misery. And this is the problem with an incompetent cult of emotionally, relationally, traumatically illiterate human beings who are in a dazed state, unable to think and frame thoughts and questions intelligently, is they should not be making decisions that require a competency that they are uneducated to provide, at least weighted as if every vote is equal. And so in Ray Dalio's system, you have the measure of competency, which is a shared assessment. Everyone who is relevant to a decision participates in the decision with a weight factor. Meaning, if I'm the analyst that studies the automobile industry and I'm right most of the time, so my peers at Bridgewater give me a scoring of an 8 in competency in my domain of car analysis. And there's another analyst beside me, but given my history, or given their history, is measured 2. They're right 20% of the time, and I'm right 80% of the time, and this other person is right 60% of the time. And then there's these other people that are good on financial instruments and stuff. You have team projects that affect many departments. And so they would make the decision to invest not on just the blank number of votes, but on the score weighting. So I would get 8 points out of 10, say, for example. And you would get 2 points, and you'd get 10 points in your area. You wouldn't get any points on whether or not to do the deal, but you'd get 10 points on how to structure the deal of weight. And you have a meritocracy that based on merit, that based on competency, which is based on a data assessment of both peers and data. You know, your trades are there. These are your trades. You did this. You've lost $5 billion over the last 10 years. You've been right 2 out of 3 times. These were your votes. They were good votes, meaning you voted on things, yes, that actually made the company money. And remember, in a capitalist billionaire hedge fund, the only measure of success is how much money you legally make. It doesn't matter how much human suffering or human well-being is created in the project, because that's not part of the paradigm. capitalism exists to turn money into more money, and that's it. So follow the law, because then you'll lose money. If you break the law, you'll lose money. So you've got to follow the law. But we're not really focused on human well-being, and the way the Bhutanese might actually think is intelligent, and I of course agree with them. So this data-based model reveals, it does a number of things. First of all, it creates transparency. Ray Dalio, as every competent, confident personality wishes in a leadership role, they want someone to argue with them. Why? Because, why does Elon Musk hire hackers to try and break in to the communication between the Tesla cars and the Tesla Corporation? Why pay a hacker $30,000 if they break in and hack your system? Because you need to understand where you have a blind spot if you are to be successful at bringing well-being to your clients. And so every competent, confident leader delights in intelligent debate and argument, and respects someone in their team who will stand up to them. Every regressed child, every insecure dictator will have that person beheaded, killed, sent to the front lines, sent away, shamed, fired, because an incompetent leader, which tends towards dictatorship where possible. You notice President Trump is admiring the Chinese dictatorship and Putin, because what he's lamenting the fact that he can't be in there. He has to keep getting elected. He has terms. This is terrible for an incompetent person, to have to keep getting elected and have your history, become accountable. I mean, why would you want that as an incompetent leader? And so you want a well-reasoned argument, because you might notice a flaw in one of your lines of code, and you might slightly rewrite that and go ahead with what you were going to do, but with taking that objection into account. And so this, you can measure the competency and security and confidence. Confidence comes from a combination of competency to do things and security in one's being. If you have those two traits, you know what you're doing and you know who you are, the more dialogue you have in front of a group with a dissident, the stronger your position emerges, the greater the intelligence, and the more awake your group is. So you want this. You want public discussion with a dissident if your data is strong. Because in an intelligent framework, the dissident will stop fighting you if you're correct. And if it's a database system, and everyone else will emphasize and reaffirm the system. If it's a corrupt, poorly thought out decision, the last thing you want, like in the US Senate trials that are going on right now, the last thing you want is information and data, around something like that, because you've got a weak position. And the more data that is brought to bear on a weak position, the more the position collapses. And so you have the tension between competency and power. Obviously, everyone benefits when a highly competent individual with a highly competent and intelligent paradigm is in power. And so you know, the Bridgewater decision-making protocol, the data is gathered and shared in an app. It is transparent. Everyone is accountable for their opinion. We're going to take an opinion. The app is going to note your opinion. You're going to write, this is my opinion. This is what I vote we do, and here's why. And that opinion I am accountable for as long as I'm in Bridgewater. 30 years later, someone can go back and say, you thought that? That proved to be completely wrong. You thought that? That proved... In fact, you're just as confident today that this and this and this is going to happen as you were 20 years when you said this and this. You've rated that your confidence in your decision was a 10 here, and you were wrong. Now, if you were wrong and you said your confidence was 40% that you were right, then if 40% of your decisions that you're 40% confident are right, it tells us that you understand your limits. If I tell you I'm 40% confident that I'm right here, but there's no other decision that I'm that confident about, I don't know that much in this domain. I don't know. And so I'm only 40% right, believe that this is the right thing to do. And this other thing, I'm only 20% that that's the right thing to do. This other thing, I'm 40% clear that I think it's the wrong thing to do. So this is my best idea. I'm 40% of the opinion that if we do this, it'll be the right thing to do. And I know nothing else that I have a higher vote for. Okay, well, if 40% of those decisions that you make with a 40% confidence ranking are right, then we know that you know yourself. You know your limits. Good. So when you say that you're 80% confident that this decision is right, and 80% of the time the decisions that you've said you're 80% confident about have made money for the company, okay, you still know yourself. And when 100% of the decisions that you say you are 100% confident about are right, we say, you know, so-and-so has a 100% confidence that this is the thing to do. He's got the best track record in our group for actually being right when he's 100% confident. He has the competence in this domain. And none of us have a narrative or a theory that points to the other decision that is in the interest of the company. So we at Bridgewater are going to do this. It's a meritocracy. Who gives a fuck about tenure? You could be on the job for 10 years and be a complete and utter failure in this domain. You'd be treated as a complete and utter failure in this domain. You could be on the job for 6 months and have a stellar track record in every one of your engagements in a certain field and come in with a bit of a history and would be listened to automatically ahead of someone with 10 years, 20 years, 30 years of experience. If you've got 30 years of failing in a given domain, you don't listen to them over someone who's got 6 months of success in the same domain. And so you have a meritocracy and an accountability for results. And the process is, this is my decision, this is me and my ranking, this is how confident I am in this decision, and this is the data that I'm referencing to support this decision. And I will be accountable to my decision regardless of what is, decided. Now, this system makes more money than virtually any other hedge fund, which is why Ray Dalio is consulted by world governments the US government, the Chinese governments, some of the European governments, consult Ray. Because in a world that worships money, the person who is most competent to make money ethically, which we just call breaking the law or keeping the law, ethically and consistently, is a figurehead. In an intelligent cult, the person most responsible for developing well-being per capita and per unit of energy invested within the law would be the deity consulted by governments. But we are in a chauvinistic paradigm in which the eggs laid by the golden goose are valued more than the goose. Who knew? Who knew that the egg was worth more than the chicken that laid them? Who knew? And so my proposal within the Human Awareness Institute is an adoption of an app. In a capitalist cult, the best apps are developed, of course, to make money because, well, we just learned that the egg is worth more than the chicken. But here's why I think this is a good idea. You may be completely out to lunch. You may have had 5 abusive boyfriends and pick another abusive boyfriend believing this time it'll be different. That means you're failing. You don't have a model for discerning between an abuser and someone who loves you. They're both there, but you're picking the wrong ones. That's a failure. You may be out to lunch in all kinds of areas, sexually dissatisfied, this, that, the other. But can you imagine voting to terminate email access from a sexual abuse survivor by the high facilitators? Like, would you ever, regardless of whether you're happily married and bringing well-being to a large number of people in your life and thus high ranking in a competency metric of such an app, or whether you're depressed and addicted and left another relationship to sleep with their best friend, could you imagine believing that it was in the public interest for sexual abuse survivors to be automatically cut off of email address accounts for telling the truth? Would you have ever voted for the idea that it was not a Human Awareness Institute issue, that a Human Awareness Institute broke the law, broke their marital agreements, broke their high agreements, and endangered the life of a high participant by sexually abusing them under the influence of psychedelics as a paying client? That's not a high issue. I mean, how dumb do you have to be in order to have that big of an oversight? And so the facilitators are not dumb. They're sociopathic in a conflict of interest in which they don't understand that they are destroying the future of their organization, betraying their mission, ruining their careers, and punching the therapeutic industry in the face, not to mention kicking and abusing the team who's volunteered time to take this position. See, they don't get it. There's just fear and ignorance, and what do we have to do to survive? Let's hide this. Let's do what every abuser in human history has done, tried to kill the story. No, I never did it. No, let's follow our leader, President Trump, down into a black hole. Lies, deception. No, I never did that. Why are people doing this to me? Ruining this great country. Here I am, slaving away, lying every day. And so we don't get it. So I would vote for a power structure in which the public anyone who's interested, a client of, a team member of, a facilitator, a board of directors, picks the mission, the strategy, the protocols in a competency-based democracy where, we rate one another's competency in certain areas for kind of ranking, and consider that. But even a basic democracy where everyone gets one vote, but must be visible. You see, lack of accountability always leads to worse decisions. It doesn't always lead to worse truth. Meaning, if you have an anonymous, you can often find more truth on chat lines and YouTube about what's actually going on in people's lives than you can in their marriages. Meaning both couples in a married relationship may be telling strangers in an anonymous format what's going on in their lives more competently than they're telling their partners. Because in a shame-based cult, where you get punished for telling certain truths, you don't tell the truth. So you make better decisions when you are accountable for your decisions. And so that's, I think, a good way of doing, a meritocracy within decisions around mission, etc. If you want to go down in public as being pro-sexual abuse and cover-up, go ahead. This is very helpful for the people in your lives who need to understand that if you leave, you are left alone with their daughter, they may sexually abuse that daughter and then tell the daughter that they should hide the secret, etc., just to ensure that the maximum harm is done, which is what is the case. If you sexually abuse someone and then encourage them to keep it a secret, more harm is done because the abuser is enabled and the person gets the message that their truth is less valuable than the game face of the abuser. That's the message. You're not that important. Or the message is it's not safe to tell your deepest truths in this cult. And so cover it up. Cover it up. Add abuse to the abuse. Now, with an independent board of directors that is published for the world, I don't think you can go very wrong, because most of us know the right thing to do. We just can't do it when we're inside a traumatic loop of our own survival coping strategies. And this is, of course, the whole reason why a public nonprofit has an independent board of directors. And Malcolm Gladwell discussed competency in a variety of things because he did some deep research on how accurately, for example, bail is granted in some cases and not granted in others. And he discovered that the people who were released on bail presented a persona in court that was more likely to be released. And he learned that the judge paid more attention to the demographics of the persona in court. Like if you're white, you're more likely to be released on bail, if you're humble, etc. And less attention is paid to the history and the underlying data. And so if you're a polite, well-spoken, friendly, well-dressed white person who is a repeat chronic offender, you're more likely to get released on bail than if you are a black, poorly dressed, slightly incoherent person who has never done a crime before and it wasn't a violent crime, but you may not be released on bail. And so there's a lot of information that Malcolm basically says that he now hires people, and even in the musician world, in the world of musicians, if more women get chosen when the musicians for an orchestra are selected behind a screen. So you can see the confirmation bias within orchestra directors by showing here's the percentage of this type of person that gets hired when you know their resume and you know this and you know that. And then here's what happens when you just listen to the music, which is what the customer is buying, the most exquisite music. That's what an orchestra should be recruiting, but they don't. They recruit resumes, they recruit appearances, they recruit stereotypes that confirm cult bias, and they don't know they're doing it, and they defend that they're not doing it. So in a sense, you'd make a far better decision, is what all this data says. You will make a far better decision if you answer the question in the abstract: should therapists take money and sexually engage with their clients under the influence of psychedelics? Does anyone in this cult not know the answer to that question? Easy. What should happen with Peter Sandhill, though? What should happen with this nice, smiling, warm, friendly, lovable guy when he breaks his marriage? See, that's very complicated. Peter? Because Peter is, for many, the embodiment of friendly, loving, charming, whatever. That's the person you want to be. That's the idea. That's the narrative in our cult. You don't need to be traumatically literate. You don't need to develop skills. You don't need to do deep research. You don't need to understand your trauma. You just need to smile more exuberantly and make witty remarks and be like someone like Peter, and that's popular. And so you will make a worse decision if you know the people involved. So this suggests that a more independent board that doesn't know anyone involved, that what Malcolm found was that a computer program was 50% more capable of predicting repeat offense than human beings in these, whether it was jury or bail or things like that. That if the people came before the judge, and this is the thing, we get a sense of someone. They're really sincere, right? They're not going to do it again. I just get a feeling, their warm handshake, looked me straight in the eye. You see, the computer doesn't look at any of that. The computer says, oh, this person sexually offended here, they sexually offended there, they lied here, they lied there. There's a pattern of behavior. And the computer says, whenever this part of the pattern is here, this part normally follows, statistically speaking, and votes on the statistic. And what's interesting is that judges, which are supposed to be great reads of character, are 50% less competent than a very crude computer system that just looks at some basic stuff and then predicts who should be let out and who will reoffend and who won't, etc. And so this all is saying that a totally independent board that is highly competent to understand sexual abuse, traumatic therapy, this and that and the other, is going to be 50% more competent than a group of traumatically illiterate, unlicensed, somewhat randomly chosen board of directors that have the primary qualification of owing an emotional debt to the people they are legally responsible for hiring and firing. It's perfectly predictable that the high board of directors would choose to a person not to ask to hear the story of a sexual abuse survivor before deciding to not only vote to keep Peter Sandhill on board, not only ignore the fact that no apology is being given despite the sexual abuse survivor requesting one from high, the people who chose, trained, recommended Peter Sandhill and did not disclose the lack of licensing and did not provide caveat to say, well, we really don't know what we're doing here. We can help you here, but not here. Not where you really need help. We can't help you there. We can help you over here, what we're good at, but what you don't need. They're not going to vote to fire that nice friend. And they will be wrong for the job that they're appointed to. That's the problem. And so I've suggested a lot of things. I began by suggesting that Peter Sandhill explain his reasoning for some of his bizarre behavior. He chose to ignore the email. You have to do that when your math is fuzzy, by the way. You know, if you ask your employee who says, okay, give me my paycheck for the week, and I worked 61 hours, or I made $2,000 this week. Okay, so where are your hours? I've done the math, but I want $2,000. Okay, so where are the hours? Well, I worked 61 hours. Okay, so when did you start, and when did you leave, and what did you get done in that hour of time? You planted 3 plants in 21 hours over here, I see. Now, when I plant 3 plants, it takes me about 10 minutes a plant. So that's about 30 minutes, but that took you 21 hours? Oh yeah, that did. As you do the math, it falls apart. And so you cannot do the math. You do not want to get into the nitty-gritty of the decisions. I mean, if you know, it might be a miracle to have the Human Awareness Institute Board of Directors, every one of them, and every facilitator, past and present, deposed, to actually have them explain to a jury how their ethics make sense for them. Okay, so here's your mission statement. And your mission statement, which includes the whole world winning, includes a cover-up when one of your own clients is sexually abused by one of you. I see. And what's the data that that's based on? Okay, there was a report in the 1960s that cover-ups of sexual abuse helped therapeutic clients. Could we see that study? And who produced that study? You see, because there's about 300 studies over here that all say that secrecy and shame is one of the biggest downsides. And who produced those studies? Actual licensed, competent people? Interesting. Okay, so you see, the jury they will get, of course, the performance, the waterworks, the mission, the whole thing. They'll get the performance, and that will actually mar the jury's ability to give a competent verdict. In this paradigm, obviously, it's a very skewed and dysfunctional paradigm that traumatic abuse patterns and lies and stuff are resolved in jail and prison at all. It'd be nice if we actually taught the facilitators in their teenage years how to be empathic and ethical and be transparent and stuff, as opposed to, you know, charging the taxpayer $100,000 a year to lock them up or do this stuff. It's a bizarre system. Systems within systems within systems that are incompetent. Nonetheless, if the app is developed that rates competency, where you have to get like 5 people who know you well to say you're a 1 to 10 a good listener, you're 1 to 10 a good decision maker, you're 1 to 10, you know, how well do you do what you say you'll do? Is your life getting better or worse in the areas you're making decisions? You know, competency. And the people that have a competency in a certain area. One person might have a competency for telling the truth and being common sense, and an incompetency for making money. So when it comes to patterns of ethical behavior, they should get a high, their opinion should be valued highly. When it comes for how is the Human Awareness Institute going to make any money, their opinion may be a negative if everything they do loses money. And so, if this person says do it, let's consider that a good thing not to do. But the goal of every competent nonprofit is to, in some way, facilitate the development of human needs: survival, security. These are a hierarchy, by the way. So you don't really deal with love and belonging in a pure sense without manipulation and agenda until you have independent survival and security. If you have proximity before you have survival and security, what you have is manipulation and reenactment of the abuse dynamic. That's just how it works. Because you're not in a relationship based on freedom, you're in a relationship based on fear and dependency, fear, trauma, and dependency that come from being insecure in one's ability to survive, which is why abuses of power are such a big deal at all levels. One person's broke, one person's a millionaire. You've got a big vertical power discrepancy. One person is very confident and aware and knows himself. The other person is terrified of knowing the truths inside of them because they're in an abuse dynamic with a parent who's going to kill them if they tell the truth. You don't have a shared power dynamic. One person is very popular and has connections and will have various people cover up their crimes if they happen, and this other person is a lone individual without the money for an attorney. You have a big possibility of abuse of power. And so every group that is oriented towards relationship well-being must include as a foundation an awareness of the survival and security of its members. Encouraging sexuality without addressing survival and security is directly enabling abuse as a statistic. It's very basic. If you do not have survival and security, and your hierarchy of needs say they are the most important thing, and someone, or let's say 5 people, want to have sex with you, and one person is going to help you get more money or something like that, and you don't like them, you're going to lie to them to relieve the trauma of a sociopathic cult in which your survival is not assured. It's that simple. And I watched it in my own parents. My mother didn't want to grow up. She didn't even want to balance a checkbook. So you make all the money. I can't even balance my own checkbook. That's the level of immaturity. Well, my father started behaving in a way that she hated. Cheated on her, She hated him. But she didn't leave because she was afraid of losing survival and security. So you get into a destructive, traumatic relationship where abuse is reenacted in front of 5 children. You cannot address competent human relationships without addressing the survival and security of every member in the community as a community concern. It should be as much of an issue for the people who will end up abusing. See, because you don't get to decide if you abuse someone, if someone is going to lie to you. When someone feels terrified, afraid of being thrown out, afraid of being abandoned, and feels like a regressed 5-year-old whose love isn't good enough, and you ask that person in a position of power, do you want to have sex with me? You don't get to decide if they tell you the truth. Nor does their adult. They're in a traumatic regression. They may not even know the truth. They may get a scream in their brain that says, if you tell the truth, you will die. And they'll say, thank you, dear. I would love to have sex with you. Nor do you get to ameliorate the fact that they loathe and resent themselves and you because you loved them. Or deal with the pain and chemicals in your body as you absorb the repressed hatred that is expressed in so many faces of their interaction. While they say, yes, 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 I want what I hate. I want the abuse again and again and again to survive, to feel secure. It's one of the reasons I would never engage with a woman who was not able and willing to contribute 50% of the relationship expenses. Isn't that big? $100, $200, $300, $500 a month. If you have separate lives, it doesn't take that much for a little bit of gasoline going out to dinner from time to time. And yet, how do you assure that you're not going to be sucked into one of these abuse dynamics by someone who is really trying to survive and feel secure, but is pretending to be in the market for love and belonging, something that they are not equipped to do, because survival and security is not met by their cult, their family, or themselves. In an abuse culture, it isn't very often. And this is, of course, the big reason we have to have all these protections between therapists and patients and things like that. You cannot get a healthy relationship without a healthy framework of people meeting their needs to survive, feel secure, love and belonging, self-esteem, developing one's personal gifts, bringing them out into the world, developing abundance, and moving into something bigger than themselves. If you can find an individual who has met their 7 human needs, you are in luck, if you are a similar individual. If you haven't learned how to survive and feel secure, you are in danger, and you are endangering them. You can't deal with a goal to increase sex or anything like that without addressing this reality. So I would happily vote to see and believe in what a community rated on competency and an independent board of directors that had a vote as well decided to do for the mission statement of HIGH, the strategy to fulfill the mission statement, the protocols employed in the strategy. In a democracy where everyone had a vote, everyone was accountable for the decision, the reasons were given, the confidence in the decision was given, the competency of the people making was participatory and democratic as well, where all of this was published online for the public. That's the ultimate safety. Because the reason that the Human Awareness Institute simultaneously said this isn't a high issue and then sued me, the only people who have sued me in my entire life are the Human Awareness Institute facilitators, to make sure fewer people heard about the story, is that it jeopardizes each of their competency rating. Anyone who understands that you stood silent while a sexual abuse survivor asked for help in a traumatic situation understands that your intelligence in that and your competency in that domain goes down. Now, who stood silent? Every single board of director member and every single facilitator stood silent. This isn't a high issue. Let's kill the story. and let's try and push the abuse survivor towards secrecy and protect the abuser. Let's not provide compensation, you see. This, if you read about this in Enron, see, Enron did not violate as many ethics and laws as the high facilitators. Malcolm Gladwell has gone into this, etc. And Enron was a state of profound complexity and uncertainty. Bernie Madoff, was a complete con artist. But Enron, Skilling, who is now in jail, committed way fewer crimes than every single facilitator and board of director involved here. Meaning, if this was a major national story, and particularly if it involved money, as opposed to the insignificance of the human heart and psyche, proportionally speaking, the Human Awareness Institute facilitators are more liable to be in jail and pay fines and apologize to the public than Jeffrey Skilling on pure data points and violations of law. Now, the fact that lots of money was lost in a capitalist cult through lots of mistakes and technical things means that it's an outrage. It is an outrage that all that money was lost, and so someone needs to be blamed. It is not an outrage in the United States of America for a man's heart to be broken, their insanity dented, PTSD to be induced, shame and humiliation dispensed by a professional therapist under the influence of psychedelic drugs, which amplify the effect of the abuse significantly. That is not an outrage, because we're dealing with something far less important than money here. We're dealing with integrity. We're dealing with trust. We're dealing with human relationships. We're dealing with the human heart and the possibility of the species to survive by learning technology of competent relationships. And bits of paper, we have all agreed, are more important than that. So, no, it's not absolutely clear that all that much would come about this, even if it's shared in the New York Times. But that is a symptom of a corrupt cult. It is not a symptom of intelligence or kindness or our future's, our species' probability of survival. Now, how should a community be measured? Like, what would an app track like this to make the general consensus in the tech world is that if you're going to invent a new technology, you want to be 10 times better than the old technology. That's what you want. And otherwise, it's, oh my gosh, we have to learn something new. I'll just use my old inefficient app, which I know where the buttons are. And, I don't want a new way of doing things if it's just 10, 20% better. So you need like 1,000% improvement to facilitate a revolution where early adopters and stuff will learn the new technology and grow with it and all that. And so what does that kind of thing look like in this dynamic? So, you have to have a fully independent board that's based on competency as opposed to shame-based loyalty. You have to develop an app that is in creating a level of engagement and power sharing that is 10 times more engaging than anything we're used to in a child-parent dynamic. 3, you need a power structure that is willing to transcend its ego, its parental identity, and its abuse dynamic to serve. To say that we're willing to let go of control and our image and our attachment to see our mission carried through more effectively, regardless of the ego image hit that we get in the process. That's necessary for high to survive and get a 10x improvement. And finally, you need a public willing to face the truth, heal, and be a responsible adult. You see, when I communicated all of this to the members of the high community in my various workshops, there was some abuse that came towards me that was nothing towards about the issue. It just, by the way, I've never liked you, that kind of thing. Oh, thank you for telling me that the room of love consists of a group of irresponsible people who, when confronted with the opportunity to serve and to love someone in a traumatic state, will instead throw insults and be silent. And be silent. Now, those that offered empathy, and we're dealing with less than 5%, those who offered empathy did not offer to help. There's a forest fire going on. We're very, very sorry. See you later. It's that. So this is not a group of responsible adults who understand that the next victim is their daughter. You see, if you don't get that, the next victim is your daughter. If you don't get that, you're not thinking. You don't understand the abuse pattern enough. And if you don't want to think, because you don't want to respond to that truth, you're not an adult. You're a scared child, afraid of being blamed for doing it wrong, which you will be in this cult because you're surrounded by scared children. If you do it wrong, you will be blamed and punished, no doubt about it, because you're surrounded by children. But it actually requires, both people can step off of the abuse dynamic. And I really got to see in my own relationship with the facilitators how frightened I was of power, how frightened I was of being responsible for my own decisions and not having anyone to lean on, particularly in a regressed, traumatized state, with the Human Awareness Institute being a primary source for love and belonging as I defined love and belonging at that time. So you need a public willing to face the truth, heal, and be a responsible adult. If you do not have such a public, it doesn't matter how many facilitators are fined, go to jail, you'll find a new abuser. In a certain way, the abuse dynamic is there to wake people up. Because the abusive parent internally is an abused child. So you have two abused children. And the question is, who's going to wake up and say, something's wrong here? I would wake up in some of my abuse dynamics in the high community, and I would just say, what's happening here, I'm not comfortable with. You're not willing to go to therapy or sort it out. I lack the skill to do anything in this dynamic. So therefore, it will continue. And I'm not willing to participate and pretend that that's okay and call this love. So let's have our ending agreement. Let's disengage. And if either of us figures out what this was and how to do it differently, we can be in touch. Because I care enough about you to want something better than an unconscious abuse dynamic. So bye for now. You have to be responsible. So what do we want to gather in data? And I mention this because I've suggested, I asked for an apology. I'm asking the board of directors to ratify things that I believe will make high 10 times better. They may reject that. Jason Weston rejected the idea of an independent trio of experts making recommendations publicly. He just ignored that, just like Peter ignored the idea of thinking. Just like the facilitators ignored my protest that this was in fact a high issue. All data is the enemy of a shame-based abuse protocol is a good way to look at it. And everything that is the medicine for a shame-based protocol is data, competency, and love. Love that cares enough to be competent. Competency that is competent enough to be loving. They are a masculine-feminine loop of the same energy. So what do we want? We want abuse, trauma, and addiction statistics. It's the first thing to measure in the community and in the facilitator body. Abuse, trauma, and addiction statistics. We want to know the levels of present satisfaction in relationship within the community. Logistically, emotionally, financially, sexually, and mentally. That's data. My boyfriend is broke. It drives me nuts. I'm 2 out of 10 satisfied about his financial situation. I'm 6 out of 10 satisfied with my own. Okay, we've got a combined financial satisfaction rate of 8 in this relationship out of a total of 20. Mentally, my partner is insane over here, and I'm too insane to know that I'm insane, but my partner tells me that I'm insane 60%. Okay, we have a mental satisfaction rating of 40%. Emotionally, I feel safe, this, that, the other, what percentage of this, levels of satisfaction. This is data. Next, relationship skills. I rank myself 1 to 10 on these 32 relationship skills. MeasureYourRelationship.com was one of the first things I produced when I started doing high things, because it became evidently clear that there were a lot of skills in relationships, and I and many other people didn't know what to do with them. Relationship, and then how do other people rate my skills? Why isn't this common practice if we actually want to grow? Then we have relationship protocols. These are our relationship protocols. Here's how we deal with sexual fidelity in our relationship. Here's how we deal with it in the community. So you have relationship protocols, and you want in any school a menu of suggested relationship protocols based on data that evolve with time that deliver high satisfaction results to those who adopt them. If they do not, there's a skill issue, or the protocol needs to be differentiated for a narrower group of people. If you have data on who's polyamorous with more than 5 people, if you have data that is segmented, then you can see if your protocols, they're good for women, they're just terrible for men. Okay, so these need to be protocols for women, and we need to develop other protocols for men that work for men. Intelligence quotient. The amount of money and time and natural resources being spent by each community member to facilitate their relational well-being in juxtaposition to their levels of satisfaction communicates intelligence. I'm spending $100,000 a year to hate my partner and feel miserable. I'm spending $10,000 a year to love and adore my partner. Who's more intelligent? It's very clear, self-evident. Global community impact needs to be tracked for each community member. What are you taking at high or in the community, and how are you bringing that into work or family, and in what impact is it having? What have you learned here that's contributing to the species? And then research and development. What are the research projects that different people in the community want to test and research? Who's willing to try a protocol? I have a new idea for how to solve a fight. Partner A does this, partner B does this, partner A does this. Who will test this protocol? Okay, 5 relationship people agree that on their next fight they're going to do that. Okay, thank you. How'd it go? 5 out of 5 rated it better than the current high argument protocol. Okay, I think this demands a better study. What about exporting these protocols to the larger culture or bringing them to local government? Here's how we make better decisions. Here's how we ensure less crime in our community. How about applying it for our city? Integration with a data framework. A competent individual with confidence that they can engage with truth is lighting up at this moment, because this is a breakthrough on a 10x level of community development. Someone who is cynical, shame-based, and has secrets is going to fight this to the death, because this brings light to fear, shame, abuse, secrets, and abuse contracts, and challenges each one of us to be bigger than the paradigm where we do whatever we do and we call it love and for your own good, where we protect the status quo by burying the information that challenges it, where we look to mom and dad and authorities and government to tell us what to do, and we blame them for our problems. And we have an abuse victim dynamic that goes on in a very small world with a very low level of well-being and high levels of reliable abuse.